All right, coming back today with another quick video. First off, just want to say thanks to everyone who reached out on my last video. It was probably the most amount of just comments and positive feedback that I've received on a video so far, and just really is super motivating to put out that type of content, but also just awesome to connect with so many members of this awesome community. So appreciate all of you that reached out, looking forward to continue making more videos. And yeah, so let's get started with this one. Something I've been thinking about a lot as I've been putting together my latest videos, especially when I've been thinking about what I'm buying and why, and just the sort of the thought process behind it. It's this idea of asymmetric payoffs. And so today I just want to talk about asymmetric payoffs and how they apply to sports cards and the sports card hobby, and how we can take advantage of our understanding of asymmetric payoffs going forward. So asymmetric payoffs, there's basically asymmetric upside and asymmetric downside. Today we're going to be focused mostly on asymmetric upside, but what is it? Simply put, it's when the expected positive payoff is greater than the downside risk. So here in this graphic, on the left side here, you see there's a big risk, small reward. That would be asymmetric downside, because the downside here is much larger than the potential upside, versus a scenario where we have a small risk and a big reward. This is what we would refer to as asymmetric upside. And so these are the types of, when you hear me talk about high floor, high ceiling type plays, it's really what I'm talking about here, where it's our downside is very low relative to the amount of upside we have. And I'll get into that in a little further detail, but that's kind of the framing that I want you all to think about. All right, first, let's get into some real world examples of asymmetric upside. If you want to, maybe before we dive into this, maybe think about sort of symmetric payoffs as a simple coin flip, where you flip a coin, and if it lands on heads, you win $1. And if it lands on tails, you lose $1. And it's a 50-50 proposition. So you're basically expected to lose exactly as much as you win. So that would be like a symmetric payoff. Your downside is literally the same as your upside. Asymmetric upside, using this same example, would be we risk $1 on a coin flip. If it lands on heads, we win $5. If it lands on tails, we lose our $1. So obviously in this scenario, you would want to flip that coin as many times as you possibly could, because on average, you're going to win $5 as often as you lose $1, which means you're basically, guaranteed to win in the long run. So 50-50 chance of heads or tails, but the payoffs are 5-1 there. So, payoff is 5 versus, 1 downside. So right there, that's an example of asymmetric upside. If you could be in situations where you could guarantee those payoffs, you would do that all day, every day, with pretty much all the money that you could possibly spend. Another example that I have seen people refer to is like just asking someone out, right? Like you see someone at a bar, or you meet someone and you ask them out on a date. The downside is just rejection. They say no, and you're still single just like you are today. Same place you are today. So really the downside is almost nothing outside of just, maybe feeling stupid. The upside is maybe you meet a lifelong partner and you get married, and it like completely changes the trajectory of your life. It's just like another example that maybe we don't always think about of this asymmetric payoffs. Exercising is another one. The downside is, I think, very limited. Maybe you feel tired, or you feel sore, or, maybe you are kind of embarrassed if you haven't been doing it in a while and you just kind of feel awkward. But the upside is improved health, improved wellness, improved longevity. And, obviously there's tons of benefits to exercising, both physical and mental. So those are some real world examples of these asymmetric payoffs. Now that we have a good framing there, let's dive into some specific asymmetric payoffs in sports cards, specifically through the lens of plays that I've made recently. The first, and I'll go through 3 examples, and then I'll give you a example of a card I bought for each category. So the first one is when you get a discount on a liquid card. And so here I'm using this example of the Jude Bellingham Topps Chrome Sapphire Bundesliga. This is like the base Sapphire rookie card. I recently bought one of these for like $13. I believe the most recent eBay comps are somewhere around the $20 range. So the beauty here is that one, I know these are selling quite often. Two, I got a discount to what the current comps are. And so basically what that allows me to do is grade it. Even if I get a PSA 9, I'm probably looking at breaking even just because of the built-in discount I got from buying it raw. And if I get a PSA 10, obviously there's massive upside there. And if for some reason I get this card and it's not gradable, I'm only in it for $13. So my max downside there is only $13. My max upside in a PSA 10, probably somewhere in like the $100 range, $75 to $100 range. So right there, you can kind of see a good example there of, the asymmetric payoffs. And on a liquid card like this, I don't have to worry about sitting on it. Like I can just send it to auction and it's going to sell right away. So another example of a card I bought recently is what I'll refer to as the cheap under the radar card. So I talked about this in one of my recent sales reviews. This is the Sadio Mane Gold Bubbles Refractor from 2019 Topps Chrome Champions League. I bought this on ComC for $7. It was the same thought process. Worst case scenario, it's ungradable, and I can just sell it raw for somewhere between $0 and $7, and that's basically my max downside. It was gradable. It was in great condition. I sent it off, got it graded, PSA 10. I sold it for $60 and netted like $52 after fees, and basically doubled my money on this. So that's another one where, because it's more under the radar, not as many people were looking at it, I was able to get it for what I thought was a very cheap price. Now, if the Jude Bellingham rookie was listed somehow for $7, it's very unlikely I would have been able to get that card because somebody else would have grabbed it because much more high demand liquid card. But in this example, this was a under the radar card that probably not a lot of people were looking for, but I graded it. It got a 10, and when I was able to sell it, I was able to get compensated with a high return. And then an example of downside, there's actually two, but they're kind of related. So they both kind of relate to just overpaying relative to what the resale values are. So one example would be you're overpaying for a hyped up player. Maybe it's like a rookie or a lot of Lionel Messi cards. This kind of happened right after the World Cup. You're FOMOing into certain players. And by the time you get that card, grade it, you basically need like a PSA 10 to make money. Another one is the example I have here is the Virgil van Dijk Genesis that I talked about. Pretty non-liquid card based on the cost I paid. I bought it right when it came out. The grading fees were higher. I basically needed a PSA 10 to have a chance at making money. And it turned out that I got a PSA 10 and still didn't make money. And you just don't want to be in these situations where a PSA 10 ekes you out a small profit and anything else you're losing, more than you would make. That's sort of the opposite of what we're trying to do. And so these are just three examples of how these asymmetric payoffs can impact sports cards. I'll leave you with this. How can we take advantage? So when grading sports cards, I always talk about this, but it's key to seek out the high floor, high upside opportunities. A bunch of questions that I ask myself when I'm buying cards is, why am I purchasing this specific card? Usually it's to grade and then sell. Sometimes it's, hey, I want this card for my PC. And the answer to that question is going to dictate the price that I'm willing to pay relative to comps or relative to, resale values. Because if it's something that I want to keep in my personal collection, I don't really care if I overpay a little bit if it means I get to secure the card. If it's something that I know I want to grade and then sell, I don't want to overpay because then I'm basically more likely to take a loss. And then what's the point of even buying it and spending the time grading it in the first place, right? Second is, what's your plan? Again, it's generally to grade and sell. But another thing I like to think about is like, okay, I can either sell this raw, given the if you get a really good deal, you could potentially just sell it raw and get a profit there. But generally the plan, right, is to grade and then sell. And then the question there is like, are you selling at auction or are you selling on a buy it now? And again, those can impact both your resale value, but also how fast you're able to move the card. So it's important to kind of think about this when you're buying a card and be okay with what your plan is. The next two is basically like, what's the best case scenario? That's your upside. What's the worst case scenario? That's your downside. If the worst case scenario is worse than your best case scenario is good, then it's probably not, that's where you get into like the asymmetric downside or, whereas you want your best case scenario to be much better on the good side than your worst case scenario is on the bad side. And then finally, how does the upside and downside scenarios compare? I kind of just went through that. If your upside is you can triple your money, but your downside is 5%, then that's amazing. If your upside is a PSA 10 gets you a 10% profit, otherwise you probably lose 50%, then you don't want to enter into that scenario in the first place. So ideally, cost plus grading fee would be less than the PSA 9 resale value, or at least close. So you want to break even, lose a little, make a little. And then 2 times the cost of, cost plus grading fee is less than PSA 10, meaning if you get a PSA 10, you're able to basically double your money or more. So that's it. That's the asymmetric payoffs in sports cards. That's how I think about, buying and grading and selling cards. I hope this was helpful. I think about this stuff all the time. I have a lot of topics like this that I can apply to sports cards that I kind of love diving into, but and happy to do it more if people think it would be helpful. Thanks for tuning in. I will be releasing more videos soon, so make sure you're subscribed if you're not, and have a great day. Thanks.